Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. I'm John Petersen from the Arlington Institute, and we're really happy to have you with us here. We come every 2 weeks, fortnightly, to plumb deeply into some fundamental kind of question and issue that's related to the transition, this extraordinary shift from to a new world and a new human that we're all going through. And so the question is that as you go forward into this space, then how do you switch from the place of this kind of linear structured kind of way of making lists and doing pros and cons and all of that kind of stuff into a place where it's all fluid and you adapt to the situation? And yet here we're into a space where the rules aren't, they threw all the rules out and they're lying to us every day and you don't know who's on first base. The question is what kind of awareness do we have to develop? What kind of skills do we have to develop? How does this work into this place where you go from being linear to non-linear, essentially, from being kind of deterministic to being intuitive, if you will. It's a real fundamental kind of shift, and it's a mind shift because you see the world in a whole new way.
And so what I learned at that moment was people generally have to get to a crisis before they will open up to something different. And if there is no crisis, they just keep going. So the crisis is being manufactured for us right now. You ask the question, what do we want? How do we know where we want to go if we don't know what we want? And my own response to that is, how do we know what we want if we don't know where we've been and we don't know our own history? Our history has been manufactured. It's one of those hypnotic things that's been fed to us. The truth about the reality has been suppressed. So we don't know what's really happening in terms of the solar system and the whole cosmos. The shock that has to happen in order to get people to say, oh, maybe I didn't have the whole story. We have to get to this point where we're willing to face the shock. We're willing to have that cognitive dissonance. We're willing to take responsibility. And then once you get a taste of that kind of freedom, all bets are off.
Well, it seems to me like the boat has left the harbor, but no one's captaining the ship. The reality is just gone really floating out on the waves, bobbing up and down. It's become so abstract that we're almost living in a parody. We're living in a parody of what we once felt was reality. We have to realize that we've slipped away from any semblance of what we could have a consensus of reality. And we're in the abstract now. One quite recent precursor of this, we could say, was the collapse of the Soviet Union. Some historians noted that there was a state of what they termed HyperNormalization. And they referred to HyperNormalization as a state when, for example, the Russians knew that whatever they were being told was a great big fat lie, but the state was telling them that to try to maintain some semblance of order. But it was like an unwritten kind of understanding. They all knew it was a lie, but they all believed in it just to continue with the caricature of life. And so they refer to it as hypernormalization. And I think something similar is happening now is that, we've got into hyper-reality. There's no fixed reality. Yeah. And so now, like the narrative, the kind of power players are coming out with a, narrative. The new normal, for example, is a narrative. Build back better is a narrative. And they're trying to get people to believe in the big fat lie, but it's like hyper-normalization. But the first thing is like to realize that these are just false structurings. I would say that we have to really let go of the sense of past securities because, as we've talked about before, the power players are trying to give a new security. And people are often hungry to have some kind of something to grab hold of. We need a different grounding. And I would say that's why we keep coming back to the kind of consciousness, the inner self, the inner grounding. It's the only thing which is essentially true in this reality.
Yeah, well, that all requires essentially a new point of view of, you know, a new perspective of yourself, a new perspective of the world. It, in fact, is almost untethering and a lack of ground, an intrinsic kind of lack of grounding, almost, I would suggest. I mean, to use your metaphor of the sea, it's almost like you're in a big bubble running, kind of floating on top of the ocean in the middle of a huge kind of storm, but you are protected in that, and you're not trying to essentially engage the outside storm in any significant kind of way. You are trying to wait the storm out.
I have to argue with that.
Okay.
So I want to pick up Kingsley's comment about the boat left the harbor and there's no captain. What happens when that situation occurs is that people begin to captain their own life. And the result is that once you do that, you can't go back. So it's like once you know something about yourself, you cannot unknow it. When you look at the number of protests that are happening everywhere around the globe, and then you look at what's happening in China with the Evergrande crisis, they did not make their payment, even though they claimed they did. And that's what I see, is that this whole thing is just going to move around the globe. And that mindset change, that taste of, we can do this our way. This is our reality. We're making this. That's going to change everybody's, people are going to see the box. It's going to change everybody's consciousness. And that's going to result in a whole new system. But what I see is this is coming together beautifully. And I think we're going to be thrilled at our own ability to manage our reality system in new ways that we hadn't thought of before, because we were so busy being focused on the programming.
From 2025 to 2027, there is a global civil war. I like to tell people that if that's the first time you've heard that term, you have no idea what it means, because everybody's familiar with a national civil war with two factions within a country. But what's a global civil war? And what it's come to me is to understand is that this is a planetary-wide uprising against governments, that there's this sense of betrayal writ large across the whole planet.
But when you get a global civil war, that suggests that people are in more solidarity. They've gone past the me and you, the vax, non-vax. They're going against the kind of one enemy, or the one the one opposition, which is everything which has been against them, holding the people down. So there's a whole re-entrainment of space. The point is that, you're out of sync if you're trying to get in sync with the old space. To resync is to go into the new space. You're not going into their playground, you're going into the new field, the new collective field, the new consciousness field. And so I think, what skills do we need? A resyncing between humanity, between ourselves. More perceptual skills. What do you want to invest in? Do you want to invest in bonds? No, you invest in people. You invest in human things. There's a whole new kind of shift in the allegiances. I think that's what's happening, John.
We are at war right now. From, in my opinion, we're at war. It's, I don't know what they call it, non-traditional war or irregular war or something like that, because it's not guns and bombs and fighting for territory, etc. It's a different kind of war. So when you take his terms, a global civil war, the meaning of the word civil is being polite, being civic-minded, etc. So the question comes up, is what Socrates, which is Martin's computer, is what he's saying. Is that talking about the kind of irregular warfare that people are engaged in, where they are countering their government with the tools of government? In other words, they're being very civil, but they're suing the heck out of the governments, and they're taking those governments apart.
Well, your point, your earlier point about this 4-day kind of movement or event,
4-day walkout
is really apropos here, because it's really well defined and well refined that the mechanism by which you bring down a government in a hurry is everybody quits. I agree with you. You can see the pieces and the cracks in the system and the light coming in and the people starting to move.
And the greatest unpredictability is human nature. And that's why, that's why the system is trying its hardest to kind of create a kind of false conformity. The greatest civil war would be like nobody pays their taxes anymore. Everyone just stops participating. We need to now favor and embrace our unpredictability, because that's the one thing that computers and AI can't evaluate. We are the wild cards, and we are the new space that we need to move into.
And so there is it's a real kind of interestingly fluid kind of situation here that is going to reconfigure the familiar landscape that we all know. And it's just important to understand that you've got to disconnect yourself from some of the old ideas and allow yourself to kind of move and adjust to this emerging new landscape in this new world, I think. Now, if you like that little taste of our quartet session, I've got a special kind of offer for you, because we'd like to make it easy for you to be able to see the whole quartet, and not just a little trailer bit, but the whole thing. But we do this every 2 weeks, and it happens, and it's an hour long. And usually we make it only available to our paid subscribers. But we've got a special kind of offer that's available for those of you who are YouTube listeners and viewers. And if you would like to see and have access to the whole session of Quartet, all you have to do is go down below, and there is a code, a special code in there. And if you click on this and go and put in the special code, what we will do is give you a special kind of membership, just that will allow you to see the whole quartet series and that's upcoming. And we'll send you announcements and tell you when the next ones come up, so it makes it easy for you to find it. But you got to make sure that you put in the code, because that'll make it free. Otherwise, it'll cost you money, and it's better when it's free anyway. So, but I'd encourage you to do that. So if you would like to see more quartet, then just go down, put the code in, and we'll make sure you get it.